Hi, once again, everyone. I'm Ed Berliner, and welcome into the Talk Sports Network and the Blue Sheet, where we discuss high school recruiting, college recruiting, and a whole lot more with the guy who knows more about it because he sees all, tells all, knows all for a number of decades. I'm not going to say how many because I never want to talk about just how old we are, but we have been around a long time, and this guy knows it all. The author of the Blue Sheet, Larry Bluestein, joins us here today. How you doing, Blue?
Doing great, Ed. Thanks so much. Again, right in the middle of the playoffs, and right in the middle of good recruiting. This is a recruiting time of year as well. So it's been busy, but very, very rewarding when you look back at the season, especially because once again, we hopscotched around COVID, as you know very well know. And hopefully by next year, we'll get less. And the year after that, we'll get less. But this just like influenza will be with us for a long time.
Here's something now that we have to hit on because while we're going to talk about what is happening in Florida at one point right now, it is endemic to what happens across the country. It makes no difference where your high school is or where your college is. What we're talking about here today will reference exactly what a lot of people are going through. So listen up, take notes, and pay attention. The University of Miami is finally going to get a new athletic director, which means they are going to get a new head coach, which means they are going to clear out a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that has been set down as the foundation for recruiting is now suddenly going to go away and vanish. It's going to become somebody else's responsibility. Larry, people, I don't think when they call for the firing of an AD, a coach, a staff, they don't understand what happens in recruiting because in many ways you've got to start right from scratch. This has got to be a dynamically explosive time at a college when you blow everybody out and you've got to start almost from ground zero when it comes to recruiting.
The uncertainty, that's what it is. People are strapped right now. Obviously, they'd like to attend a school like Miami or a school like USC or any of these places, and now Virginia Tech with Justin Fuente parting ways as well. The thing that gets me about this is people just think, let's lose 3, 4, 5 games. Let's not give anybody a chance. Let's fly a banner over the stadium and let's fire the coach. Let's fire the athletic director. But what you do when you fire an athletic director who has worked with everybody in the structure of the athletic department, not just football, mind you. And
Right.
I know football is the king of all kings, and places like Gainesville, Florida, and Lincoln, Nebraska, and Norman, Oklahoma, they are the freight, complete
Yes.
freight. I mean, they're places like Miami, which never draw very well, and there's schools like that rely because of being a private school on obviously corporate funding and a lot of donations and a lot of fundraising. So what happens when you hire a new athletic director? That athletic director comes with all the knowledge that they have with people that they're comfortable with, and not just maybe at an administrative point, but maybe on the athletic field. And that doesn't just include, remember, for those fans at USC who want Lynn Swan and and Reggie Bush
Yeah, we're going to
to
get
be
to
the
that in a couple
athletic
of minutes.
director,
Guaranteed.
and Miami who want Alonzo Highsmith and who want Bernie Kosar to be AD. What you're doing is you're talking without knowledge, because obviously an athletic director is everything to a university, because you hire all those sports. Miami being a private school, USC being a private school, probably won't have as many sports, but they still have 6 and 6. They still have 12 men and 12 women sports. So you have to overlook that. Then you have to hire not just the new football coach, but if you come in and your soccer program is terrible, you have to hire a new soccer program, new coach, and then everything that goes along with that. So your job is really, it's crazy, but to be a good one. And I'll point out some at Virginia, at Duke, who are 1-2 in the ACC in overall every sport: women's and men's basketball, women's and men's tennis. They have wrestling. So they're maybe they're not getting it done on the football field, but obviously that in those areas, it's a tough go. But the very fact that they have a grasp on what they're doing at Alabama and places like Ohio State, where all their sports teams are successful and their football programs draw, those are the places you start looking. And I'm sure this search has begun a long time. It's schools like Miami, who are in need of that athletic director. So the big thing is now it's almost better. This is getting a complete new transmission is what it is. You take your transmission, the old one out, you put the new transmission in, and it runs. Okay, so now it's a different transmission, but at the same time, the objective is the same. But the best thing about it is you're getting people who are more progressive, more knowledgeable on how to build structure the foundation of a solid football program, a solid basketball and baseball program. And that's the way it's supposed to be done. You can't just grab people out of the air and say, he'd make a great athletic director. Well, these people train a long time under really qualified people to get where they're at, just like any walk of life. So that means that there's complete change when you have the athlete. Because remember, the president of the university and the board of directors, after they hire, they don't want to hear about it. They want to hear good things, right? They don't want to hear you, hey, we don't have this and we don't have that. Well, we could have told you that in the interview.
And they're basically saying, look, we hired you as an athletic director. Fix it. That's your job.
Yes, we're paying you very good. And hey, you look at the average of a Power 5 school athletic director, they're not hurting for funds, believe me. They're making really good money. They get a lot of perks. I mean, they're getting the cars to drive. They're getting the restaurants to eat at, just like everybody else is. And, that's part of the sponsorship and, these schools have. I mean, and programs that are like that, you have to understand. That athletic director is the second in charge in the whole university. When you think about it, the president and the committee and they're the bosses, but you have nobody else to answer to. So you've got to start delegating. You've got to bring back and restore, and a lot of these programs, some sense of pride, some sense of people wanting to be here. The thing that Miami and USC have going for them, they're parallel programs. They're both off-campus football facilities, both private schools. They're both functioning on a lot of endowments and a lot of corporate sponsorship. Both of them have hospitals on campus that are, taking care of the academic community. But that's a spillover, because even if you're not an athletic fan and you're just a student at Wyoming, I mean, when Wyoming does well in anything, if you happen to have been a physicist and then all of a sudden you say, hey, Wyoming won the Sun Bowl or whatever they did, you feel good about it because there's a sense of pride. And even if you're not an athletic fan, every an athletic fan rather, you're always in that mode to try to be prideful. It's about your school. You don't want someone to say, oh man, Miami's a corrupt school and they're stealing kids and they're giving everybody money. You don't want to hear that. Right. I mean, that's the last thing. So as you said, when the new athletic director comes to town, it's not the lack of talent. I can tell you this. And even when your linebacker at Miami last week came out and said that they weren't getting enough work, and learning things. I mean, who is that on? So that's what I'm saying. In game 10, you shouldn't be turning the ball over 6 times. So who's that on? That's on coaching. You have the athletes. Now, as you said, get the new athletic director as he goes through things. Priority 1 is to hire a new football coach. And then slowly but surely, keep your hands on. Keep your hands on, but don't get, you know what I'm saying? Don't be Jerry Jones, but keep your hands on, because you got to know everything. And the same thing goes for a university president. You and I talked about this, I think, 3 weeks ago. Any president of a university says, I don't handle that. It's not it is your deal. It is your deal. It's your restaurant.
Well, they finally have at the University of Miami a president who came out and said, I'm going to do something about it, which would really go back to a long time for Miami to do anything about that. Yeah. It's good to have the president involved. You have to have them involved.
It's a must.
However, when we're talking about recruiting, let's give the knee-jerkers, if you will, a lesson here, because it makes no difference whether the college is Coastal Carolina, USC, Miami. When you bring in a new AD, your recruiting is disrupted. You do have recruits that are set already along the line that have been contacted, but you now have a change. The kids need to look, the parents need to look. Everybody needs to start examining where the new onus is going to be from this university now. So it's not as if you bring somebody in and bang. I mean, recruiting is going
Yeah,
to be
yeah, yeah.
perfect and you're going to bring in A-listers and 5 stars again. It causes a disruption because it may take, and Larry, you're going to be the balance on this. It may take a year, might take two to get back and get the recruiting back in the line once you have an entirely different perspective on how that recruiting is going to go.
Well, let us take the state of Florida, and this is a really good example of what you're saying right here. No longer, and this has been Miami, Florida State's big thorn, is that somebody of the three has always been in the national spotlight. Well, no, none of the three are in the national spotlight right
True.
now. In fact, everybody's looking at this state like, what? I mean, you guys produce all these guys that are in the NFL. What do they just leap over the colleges and stuff? So that gives everybody an opportunity to stay in it. And I'll give you the one most important thing about this, where what you're saying is 100% correct. And in a real world, it would make a lot more sense that what you're saying, but we're not in a real world. We're in a transfer portal world where Florida State used 13 kids to fill their roster this year. Miami used 7 and is the author of that. Manny Diaz started that 3 years ago. That's the one thing that's going to keep Miami in the spotlight because there's a lot of kids. If you ever look in the transfer portal, there's a lot of these kids that after one day of practice and their third string, they peel everything off and get in that transfer portal. And there's so many kids that go in it without at first, what it was is UCLA said, hey, you leave Wisconsin and we'll get you in here, and that happened. But then all of a sudden kids thought that was the great way to go. So that thing is so clogged up right now with kids just leaving. So in that context, you have a lot of, it's almost like a tryout, which is crazy.
Well,
These
yeah,
kids will
the
come.
players, the student athlete themselves need to understand that there are A-listers, there are
Yes.
Bs, there are Cs, there are Ds, and guess what? College athletics and specifically college football has a huge roster. They've got to fill all those slots. They got to have all those
Yeah.
background players ready to go. So it's not as if this kid was a 5 star maybe at his school in Montana, but when he comes here to the big time, he becomes a C-lister. Yeah, we want
Yeah.
you, we need you, we got to have you, but that's because we got to feed the machine. We are putting cattle fodder in there, and you're part of the cattle fodder, kid. And this time,
Well,
many times, they completely go past that because they all think, well, if this school wants me, I'm going to be a star. You better put that in a sock and you better worry about that because that's not always going to happen.
Well, here's what the wave is going to go towards, and it's funny because I'm not sure a lot of people know, but University of Hawaii is a good example. Here's a program that will get some top-notch kids. They'll go to the mainland and get California kids, and even Nevada and all up and down, and they'll get kids, to come to University of Hawaii to play. As kids who were like 2, 3, 4 stars, just to infuse them. But the rest of the roster is just comprised of dudes from Hawaii because they can't afford, to put all these guys up. So a lot of these kids live in.
Exactly, and that's my point because they become the cattle fodder at that
Yes,
point that people don't
exactly. So,
understand.
but that's where we're headed to. I mean,
Yes.
really, and when recruiting is considered, you're going to try to stack your team with some really, really good kids, but your depth. And you look at those middle line teams right now. Yeah, the Alabamas and stuff we all know, but the teams that are more apt to be 500 or maybe just a little over 500, they've got kids, but they don't have a deep team. And that's the thing that's holding a lot of these programs back, because as well as I do, Alabama will lose 200 kids and get 201 the next year. So that's the crazy part where everyone goes, oh man, look at how many guys are going in the first round from Alabama. And then the next year you're saying the same thing. And then the next year you're saying the same thing. So to be into that, the realistic thing is a lot of schools point too high, way too high. Everybody, if you win 4 in a row, you're already, we're going to win the national title. No, you're not. You know what? Do what you've been taught to do. I mean, just, win your district, okay? Or win your conference. Then you move on from there. But
Right.
not everybody's going to be a national champion. In fact, 132 schools a year are it. So that's
The
that's
truth.
why I'm saying play. You know what? I would much rather have a team that will win 9 games plus 110. Wouldn't you like to have a team that's 10-3 every year? I
Why
would.
not?
I mean, it's like Lou Piniella once said. He goes, you know what? After he went 0 for 7 and then got 3 straight hits and he was hitting 300. But the 0 for 7, he was breaking his bat and he was, oh my God. But then at the end of the day, someone reminded him, if you get a 3 hits every time and 10 at bats, you're a 300 hitter. So that's what I'm saying. Not everybody could be, score 200 touchdowns and all that. But the thing is you have to play. You have to be realistic, and your time will come. But in today's recruiting, you look at schools that have gotten it, like Michigan State, perfect example. He went out and he caught lightning in a bottle. He got all these kids to transfer in and the transfer portal, and they've done extremely well. I mean, one amongst the best in the Big Ten. But at the same time, you have to be able to facilitate that. And but I think in cases like when you come along with a new head coach, it takes a long while to get relationships.
Right.
That's the thing.
That's there it is right there. It's the relationships that people pass by. People go, don't worry, we're going to get rid of the head coach, we're going to get rid of the athletic director. We'll still be a powerhouse in recruiting. No, you
Yeah.
won't. Because you've
Yeah.
still got to integrate those coaches from an old system, if you will. Look, and
Yeah.
we'll use Miami as a for instance here. Manny Diaz is going to be out, no doubt about it. Somebody's going to come in and they'll bring in their own person. Well, does Diaz's whole staff disappear? No. You've got to keep certain people there because there's your smoothing, if you will, of the
Oh
way. They're
yeah.
going to keep a relationship, and eventually they're probably going to take most of them and push them out. But if you just drop a staff and say you're out of here, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're cutting off your head, if you will, and your arms, because you've still got to have those relationships that are going to still keep the kids coming. And that's tough to do, Larry,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Well,
you've still got to have then an older staff or a past staff has got to say, still come to our school. We have a new coach. The kid could ask, how well do you know the coach? Well, I know him by reputation. Well, but you haven't coached with him yet. What's it like? And what's the athletic director going to be like? There's an awful lot of things going on at the lower
oh
level
yeah.
here that people just bypass and they think it's all going to be, roses and champagne here. It doesn't happen that way.
It's not. And you just, you made up a good point about that. You have to keep, even when Coach Norvell at Florida State took over, he kept the old guard like Odell Higgins, who's been around forever, because so you don't. If we could use, and I think in South Florida, we've already been privy to this with the Miami Marlins and how they took over and got rid of Mr. Marlin himself, Jeff Conine, and guys who were close to the program, and Hawk and guys like that, and you don't endear yourself to the fan base when you do that, and I don't want to hear an owner or anybody say I don't care what they say. Yeah, you do, because they're the ones that pay your freight, and that's what I'm not telling you that
Same thing
you
in
got to listen
college
to
too.
every.
I mean, there's still people who come in and buy tickets and buy the T-shirts and buy the
Yeah.
hats and do everything else. And you've got the major sponsors that are sitting out there that want to win. Look, I got news for you. There's a lot of major sponsors out there at Miami, USC, and other schools. They're shoveling an awful lot of money into these programs, and they don't want to be associated with a 4-7 program or a 5-6 program. They want to win like everybody else. Why? Because it's good for business. It makes people go out and buy their toilet paper, their cars, and their sneakers.
Yeah.
If you're a
Yeah.
loser, nobody goes out and buys them because they identify the sponsor then as a loser. So that's why this is all about business, and you can't stop that. You can't just
No.
shut that off at the tap.
No, and you can't. And Miami's schools like USC, Miami, programs like that, I'm picking on them only because they're both paralleling each other right now. They're
Right.
both private schools. They've both been in their, in their glory during the USC probably a little bit more, but the fact is they both turned out quality football players since the 60s, and that's why I'm saying, and athletes in general. But you're 100% right. You come on board, and like I said, what you need to do is you can't alienate by getting rid of a DeMarcus Van Dyke, let's say, because he's a great recruiter. He's a UM guy. He played in the NFL. So you don't want to get rid of guys like that. Now, it's up to them if they want to stay with you, but you got to at least extend that olive branch because it will help you as an incoming football coach. And you can almost guarantee, and remember this is especially, I'm sure they're gonna whoever they bring in, or the new AD, is gonna bring in somebody who has had some ties with South Florida, whether it be the coaches,
Probably.
whether it be recruiting, because that's the way it is. This is a hotbed. Everybody comes down here. I don't care if you're South Carolina or South Dakota State. You've been down here. So that's the plus that Miami has. That's the plus USC has. That's a plus that a lot of these programs who have coaches in waiting, guys who, even Virginia Tech. I mean, when you take a look at it, Virginia Tech is located, and a lot of people who follow recruiting, in one of the most fertile areas in the world. The Michael Vicks, the Allen Iversons, the Ronald Currys, they all come out of the
Excellent
Hampton
athletes.
Road area. And
Yeah.
you see, so they parallel each other as well. And that's why I'm saying right now it's going to be paramount who you get in charge for athletic director, because if you get a really good athletic director, they're going to make a sound hire on football. If they have to bring in a new baseball, whatever. I'm not trying to get anybody crazy, but that's what happens. Ed Berliner, you just took over this store, this new store, and there's some employees that you may want to get rid of. I mean, it's just because it's your style. Evidently, the style that was run before wasn't so successful. So who's to say who you keep and who you let go? But my point is, from your own standpoint, you got to keep people in any place you go, any employment that know that know the climate. If you want to let him go after a year or two and you part ways, that's fine. But at least you got to have a running start. You can't put yourself
What you've done
and
is
alienate everybody.
you've got a little salve going here. It's not all abrupt. You're actually working towards something, and it makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
It's a nice, easy, slippery slope. Two things I want to make sure we talk about here before we run out of time. And this, of course, talks about Miami and talks about every other school as well. This absolute nonsense and idiocy that has to stop, but of course it starts a lot with these fans, who most of them know about 99% less than what they need to know about what really goes on. They're fans. Look, people can go ahead and say whatever you want. It's okay. We want to generate the fan. But here's the reality. You don't bring legacies into the program. I hear this all the time at Miami. Hey, we got to bring in Alonzo Highsmith. We got to bring in Ed Reed. Maybe we'll bring in Bernie Kosar. Maybe Gino Torretta. What the hell have they done, with all respect to these guys who are outstanding athletes, when it comes down to running a college athletic program? Have they trained? Have they been there? Have they been an assistant AD? Do they know everything that happens, from the bocce ball team to the swim team to the track team to the football team to the baseball team and everything? No, they don't know. And it's not a disrespect, but you don't bring legacies in to be athletic directors because they don't know. If they've trained, God bless them, give them the shot. But to just bring somebody in because they're a name, that's one of the dumbest things that you could possibly do.
Yeah, well, obviously, it just let's hire these guys to be lifeguards when they can't swim, and that's the whole thing.
Good point.
I mean, it's crazy. People have to understand, if they want all these people, whether it's Miami or SC or Wisconsin or Maine, if you want your former football players involved, get them involved in football. They don't need to be athletic directors. They could be, it's like they did with Hall of Famer Ed Reed. They made him into the director of football. I guess I guess that's the, I don't even know his title, but
which is fine. He's almost a manager, if you will, of the football program, which is great. But let's be honest, he doesn't have a tremendous amount of power, because here's the way it goes, kids. Listen up carefully. Here's the athletic director. Here's the head coach. You got a manager? Guess what? That manager is down here somewhere. It is still AD to head coach. It stops there. A guy like Ed Reed can certainly help the program. You want a guy there. But to put him in charge of the entire athletic program for a major university? Come on. I don't know what you're smoking, but you better start selling it, because I'll tell you, it's going to make a whole lot of people well and make everybody happy. That's great stuff.
Yeah, because there's no reality in it.
None.
And the whole thing is, though, Ed, I think the great point that you make, you get these people involved in the football program. I mean,
Yes.
there's a need to do that. Like I said, there should be maybe a general manager. And if that's what you want Alonzo Highsmith
Okay.
to be, he's qualified because he's worked for the Packers and such, and he knows from a football standpoint and roster management and things like that. That would be fine. But don't all of a sudden say, hey, you know what? We'll see him at courtside when Coach L or Coach Katie Meyer play. He ain't going to none of those.
No.
I mean, it's sort of like I made a joke because Donnell Bennett, former University of Miami back, played with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Redskins for 8-9 years. When he became a head coach, I said, the toughest thing for you, Donnell, is going to be carrying your own bags because you didn't have to do any of that stuff. And that's what I'm saying. These guys aren't used to doing footwork. I mean, God bless them. They were blessed with that athletic ability where they don't have to do it and they can pay other people to do it. But yeah, certainly understand that Reggie Bush is not going to be the next head coach at USC because of the fact that he doesn't have enough organization, no experience at it. So that's what I'm trying to say.
It's the paper pushing is what people don't take into account. It's sitting behind the desk and having to deal with where are we going to get our sneaker contract from, and who's going to take care of putting the new surface on the tennis courts, and who's going to
Right.
rebuild the diving tower over here at the swimming center, who's going to do all that. That's an athletic director, and you can't just hire somebody. I've heard people say, well, they'll hire a good assistant to do it. No. See, it doesn't work that way. The buck
No.
stops at the table, and I guarantee you the president of a university is going to come to that AD and say, what have you done? Well, I handed it off to John or Joe or Ed or Larry. No, you didn't.
See ya.
You're out of here. That's your job to do. So you bring
Exactly.
in somebody who is experienced and knows the layout,
Yeah.
which leads us then to another issue here I want to make sure we talk about. People at school, again, here's another thing. Fans, we love you. Go ahead. Do whatever you want. We're not telling you to stop. All we're trying to do is help educate you a little because we've been doing this a long time, okay? It is completely unreasonable to think in the case of such, it's completely unreasonable to think about in the University of Miami's case that if there's going to be a new head football coach, let's go get a veteran coach. Let's go get somebody who's in his 50s, somebody who's in his 40s, somebody who's had great success at a university somewhere, somebody who wants to move up. I got news for you. Miami is not a premier program to come to anymore at this stage. They were, maybe they will be again. But to get somebody who's actually having success someplace, just drop everything and come to Miami because, ooh, it's sunshine, it's Miami, it's the big bad hurricanes. No, it's not. You're not just going to get veteran coaches who are going to bail out. You get somebody from a B program, hey, maybe so, but you do have to look at assistants, great assistants who are on the rise at a situation like this. But you're not just going to get a veteran coach to drop everything and come here because it's Miami. Those days are done.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. Your words are gospel, but evidently, there's enough opposition. Especially because it comes from a lot of the boosters who are fans,
Yes.
and sometimes, in a lot of cases, I know people. I would never see this happening at schools like at Alabama and such, but there's a lot of programs where a lot of the boosters kind of dictate a lot of the policies because when you're writing $2-3 million a year checks. And you want your team to be, really good. And that's a lot of programs have gotten in trouble. And that'll take us to the NIL one time you and I'll have a bout because now it's getting worse and worse and worse. And we talked
Yep.
about, I mean, you know what? These kids De'Ara King will never play a down of football in the NFL. I could pretty much say that because he's not fast enough to be a wide receiver or durable enough, and quarterback is not going to make it. So he's parlayed his senior year where he didn't even play into a pretty good chunk of change. You see, and that's going to, I think, and this is the first year of this. It's gonna be. Look at Bryce Young from Alabama. He's making $1 million.
College student
$1
making $1
million.
million. God bless him.
I mean, man, I'll tell you what, I should have worked out a whole lot more, man. I'll tell you.
We
Holy
both should have,
mackerel.
yeah, but we just didn't have the legs for it.
No.
This comes down to another discussion as well as assistants. When we in this whole again, we come back to University of Miami, but I think it's germane to all the other schools as well. Please take that. That's what we're doing here. I came up with an idea for a couple of very highly touted assistant coaches to become the next coach at the University of Miami, and I was assailed for it. How dare you? You're bringing somebody in who's never been a head coach before. You're bringing in somebody to learn on the job. We don't need an assistant. We need
We
Urban
already have
Meyer.
one of
We
those.
need a Mac Brown. We need somebody like that. Hey, guess what? These assistants at major programs like Clemson and Georgia, they've been sitting there and they know how the ball runs here. They know how the business is done. They work right under the assistant coach. They are
Oh yeah.
prepared for it. It's not like they're sitting in a bubble somewhere. They
No,
bring with them
no.
a lot because they learn from great programs like a Clemson, like an Ohio State, like a Georgia. So it's not as if you're walking in here and all of a sudden they're rookies, they're babes in the woods. Assistant coaches make pretty damn good head coaches. And sometimes
Yeah.
you got to take the gamble and you got to jump on the train before they disappear. And you're out in the cold saying, gee, I wish we'd have given this guy a chance 3 years ago.
Yeah, all assistant coaches though, Ed, when you think about it, I mean they all if they really have that desire and that, just that
They
knack of being a head
know.
coach, they become one. We've seen people like Cam Cameron, and we've seen Randy Shannon and people like that, Greg Schiano, at the NFL level that are better coordinators than they are as head coaches. I mean, Cam Cameron was a great coordinator, but he wasn't a really good head coach. Randy Shannon, who happens, I've watched Randy Shannon play forever. And remember, he started out, he was a linebackers coach with the Dallas Cowboys, and he was a head coach, and he was a coordinator, and he did a really good job as a coordinator. And then all of a sudden, things happen. But more people or you have to find out, though. And you're 100% right. You got to give people chances. And the coach Lanning from Georgia, who you had met or alluded to, I mean, he's definitely a guy who's a next up type of guy who either will get that. Listen, Virginia Tech too. I mean, they're looking for a position. Justin Fuente was let go, but they're looking in the same lines as USC and Miami. They certainly have a fan base that's crazy good and supportive. And you got to look at it. Virginia Tech, out of any college in the country, has had. Look at the longevity they had before Justin Fuente. What,
Sure.
25 years? With Beamer. So, I mean, it's they're now starting to see how the other half lived. The same thing with at Florida State. They were so comfortable with what Bobby did for all those years, and rightfully so. He's a winner. And then all of a sudden he goes and, the coach in waiting does a good job, but then outstays his welcome. And so it's not so easy. So,
And we're not saying that assistant coaches are the answer. That's not what we're
they are.
saying.
They all
You
were
have
assistant coaches sometime.
you have to vet them. You have to look at what they've done. You have to interview them. You have to figure out if they're right for your program. You have to go through
Right.
all this. But what I'm pointing out is you cannot simply just look past rising assistant coaches when you have a program that is in the throes of an upheaval like a University of Miami is right
Yeah.
now. You can't afford that. And you're not going to bring in somebody who's just going to be a stopgap for a few years, because then guess what? You're going to start this recruiting issue again where you're going to have to then ride another wave where you're
Oh
not
yeah.
quite the same and everything changes. And meantime, while you're doing that, the University of Florida's, the FSU's, the FIU's, the FAU's, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Texases, and the USC's are all making strides. And they're all doing better than you are. And they're all stealing kids that you should be getting. So you have to look at everything, and assistant coaches are not just automatically bad because they're assistants. Again,
Right.
back to the AD making the right decision.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good way to end on something like that. So positive. I mean, but everything, what we talk about are things that are black and white or out there, the reality, but people choose to
Okay.
ignore it or act like it's not happening. So, we can only use our experience to try to relate to them, what it's all about, especially in this context. And when it comes to recruiting,
Right.
it's just, recruiting has changed so much. It's really tough to say how anything's going to go now.
Look, guys, Larry Bluestein has been doing this for half a century. I've been doing this and covering sports now for over 35 years, 40 years. I mean, my entire adult life I've done it. We've been there, we've seen it. We're not perfect. We're not coaches. We never played the game. I get all that nonsense. But we have seen the inner workings and the machinations of what goes on at universities and professional programs. We've watched it. So all we're doing is just bringing a common sense approach to it. You as
Yeah.
fans, scream all you want. Go right ahead. Call us names. That's fine. We can take it. We got thick skin. We've been doing this for a long time. But all we're trying to do is say, look at the Look at the reality of what's going on, and that will make the program better. And you won't call us names maybe in the end, who knows. If you want to get a hold of Larry Bluestein, you want to find out what he has to say, which is everything. He is the best in America. Period. End of story. Walk away. There it is. Facebook, Larry Bluestein Recruiting. Twitter, at Larry Bluestein. Instagram, Our Boy Blue, BLU. And on the website, you go to LarryBluestein.com and you can find out everything that's happening there. Larry will push you along to all his different shows, and he will appear here as well, and we'll talk about it. Larry, always a pleasure, my friend. Stay frosty, stay good, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it as always.
All right, buddy. Hey, by the way, if you want to get a hold of me and you want to go ahead and drop a dime, do that. Facebook and Twitter at Berliner Speaks. Catch all of Larry's programs and all of our exclusive programming at TalkSportsNetwork.com. We'll see you there. For Larry Bluestein, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Stay cool, and until we meet again, rock on, true believers. See ya.